Hello friendos and bendos, it's me Z, and look, I don't have to introduce Superman to you. He's the archetypal superhero, and one of the most popular in the world, and as a result of being one of DC Comics' flagship characters, Superman has had tons of adaptations outside of his home medium of comics. Movies, shows, video games, but there's one Superman adaptation that nobody talks about. It was a show that got 2 seasons, lasted literally a year, and I can barely find any content or discussion on it online beyond reviews of the first episode from when it came out and talks about its cancellation. Friendos and bendos, I'm talking about Krypton, a Superman prequel show you might not have even heard about that I recently binge-watched and that has absolutely consumed my thoughts in such a way that the only thing I can do is share my brain rot with you. So, let's talk about Krypton, what it was about, if it was even any good, and why it ended prematurely despite plans for further seasons and spin-offs. I think the best way to start this review is to go through the beginning of the show, as Krypton has a pretty good first episode that gives us all the main concepts and characters that we'll need for now. So, let's get started. The show begins by introducing us to Seg-El and his grandfather, Val-El, in the city of Kandor on, surprise surprise, the planet Krypton. Val-El has been tried and found guilty of treason for presenting evidence of the existence of extraterrestrial life coming towards Krypton, and for that, he is executed right in front of Seg's eyes. This treason also strips the El family of their guild rank and sends them to the slums of the Rankless, where we pick up 14 years later with a more grown-up Seg, who's had to live in squalor with his parents, himself running scams on guild members with his friend Kem just to help them make ends meet. We're soon introduced to other players in the story as well, including Jaina Zod, leader of the Sagittarii, Kandor's military, her daughter and subordinate soldier Lyta Zod, who's secretly in a relationship with Seg, and Dev M, a fellow soldier and Lyta's closest friend, who happens to also have a not-so-secret crush on her. We're also given a better introduction to Darren Vex, the Chancellor who, under the orders of Kandor's Supreme Leader, the Voice of Rao, sentenced Seg's grandfather Val to death. We also meet Nyssa Vex, Darren's daughter. The two of them have a plan to overthrow the Voice of Rao, and to do so, they arrange a marriage between Seg and Nyssa, hoping the El family's positive history with the Rankless is likely to get the Rankless on their side of the coup. Finally in this episode, we meet the show's second main character, Adam Strange. His introduction and what he says in his meeting with Seg is what sets off the show's true main plot, and I think it's best if I let him say it himself.
My name is Adam Strange. I come from a planet called Earth, a time centuries from now, and I've come here to warn you. Someone from the future is coming to destroy Krypton. Because where I'm from, your grandson becomes the greatest hero in the universe. Like, ever. Unless someone changes things to make sure that he's never born and...
You alright?
I'm running out of time. Take this. You have to find the fortress. You have to save Superman.
Later in the episode, using the crystal given to him by Adam, Seg discovers his grandfather's Fortress of Solitude, located in the mountainous frost outside of Kandor, where he's able to once again communicate with Adam, who gives Seg Superman's cape and tells him the rest of the story. The alien presence that Val-El warned about 14 years ago, and the time traveler that's come back to make sure Superman is never born are one and the same. It's a being that needs no introduction. Brainiac, the collector of worlds, and his arrival on Krypton is imminent. That, minus a few irrelevant details like Seg's parents being killed, is the first episode of Krypton, and like I said before, it does a very well done job of introducing all the show's key players, as well as the main plot of stopping Brainiac, and the secondary one of the government coup, both of which intertwine as the series continues. The next 3 episodes are alright, with episode 4 introducing us to a new, for now unnamed, major character, and an ending reveal that Brainiac has taken control of the Voice of Rao. But despite that admittedly pretty big plot development, it's not until the next episode, episode 5, that, in my opinion, begins Krypton's transformation from a solid show, but nothing to write home about, to something really noteworthy. At the end of episode 5, we learn that the true identity of the unnamed man is Drew Zod, Lyta Zod's son from the future, and infamous enemy of Superman. Drew Zod, who I'm just going to refer to as Zod for the rest of the video, while his mother and grandmother I'll call by their first names, twist the entire show and its premise on its head, as in the next episode, episode 6, Zod reveals that he's the time traveler Adam detected going back in time to stop Superman from existing, except that's not the true reason he did it. You see, Brainiac didn't actually time travel at all. He was always going to invade Krypton at that point in history, and his bottling of the city of Kandor is what leads to the instability of Krypton's core and the planet's eventual explosion 200 years later that sends Superman to Earth. Zod hasn't traveled back in time because he's aimed to stop Superman from existing. He's traveled back in time because his aim is to stop Brainiac's goals and ensure that Krypton is never destroyed in the first place. This reveal changes everything, because now everyone is put in a conflicting position. Adam now realizes that in order to save Superman, he actually has to stop Zod and purposefully ensure that Brainiac bottles Kandor and destroys Krypton. This puts him at odds against Seg, who obviously doesn't want his planet to be destroyed, and so joins Zod in stopping Brainiac. So, what's Zod's big plan to stop Brainiac, you ask? Well, it turns out, on Krypton, there's an ancient weapon, hidden underground, with the power to stop any threat. So, what's the weapon in question?
It is hot as hell in this funky ass, hot ass room I'm in. Is that the Grim Reaper?
Yeah, motherfucking Doomsday! And obviously, everyone except Zod realizes that this is a terrible idea, so they decide to work with Darren and Mrs. Koo instead, because they now share a similar goal, since the voice of Rao and Brainiac are one and the same. Except, that shit doesn't work, because Brainiac is Brainiac, and Kryptonians on Krypton are essentially just humans. So, what do we do? Well, we find out that Val-El has actually been alive this entire time. He faked his own death by escaping into a dimension he discovered called the Phantom Zone, a place you may know from literally any Superman story ever. In the Phantom Zone, since it exists outside of space-time, Val learned copious amounts of information about the worlds beyond Krypton and about potential future events. Seeing this as an opportunity, as Brainiac's main goal is to gain as much knowledge as possible, Zod makes a deal with Brainiac to give up Val-El in exchange for sparing Krypton. Not wanting to sacrifice his grandfather, who he just found out is alive, Seg instead hatches a plan to trap Brainiac in the Phantom Zone, and he manages to succeed, before Brainiac grabs him and drags him into the Phantom Zone with him. Zod then, seeing this as an opportunity to permanently get rid of both Brainiac and Seg, destroys the Phantom Zone projector, so that it will never open again. And with this moment, something ominous happens. Superman's cape morphs and changes. The crest of El changed to the crest of Zod. We skip to 6 months later, where we learn that using the leverage of him having a part to play in Brainiac's defeat, him being part of the Zod family, and only Val-El knowing the full truth of his actions, Zod has taken full control of Kandor's government, and in his council chambers, he forces Krypton's other leaders to
kneel before Zod!
And all of this is just Season 1, and the Cliff Notes version at that. I skipped over a lot of stuff in order to give a condensed recap, both because I'm lazy and because I don't want to spoil every last thing in the show if you plan to watch it after this review. Season 2 gets even crazier, by the way. Seg and Brainiac manage to escape from the Phantom Zone, but end up linked together. Lobo is introduced. Zod takes control of Doomsday. Shit gets really good. So good, in fact, that I'm not even going to attempt to do a Season 2 recap, because there is just no way I'm going to be able to get across just how good some of the little moments and intricate plot connections are. What I can do, however, is talk about the different characters and what I loved about them, both as individuals and as an ensemble. The main character, Seg-El, is played by Cameron Cuff, and he is just an absolute joy to watch in this role. Seg has this perfect grit and charm to him for the roguish scoundrel archetype he's supposed to embody, and he's defined by his emotions, but isn't clouded by them, nor does he allow his beliefs and truth to be smothered. Seg is an anchor, both the audience's anchor to the main threads of the plot, and the anchor of all the show's other characters as well. So many characters rely on Seg, and his relentless determination and unwillingness to let his ideals be compromised by the increasingly dire situation he encounters. His absence after he's trapped in the Phantom Zone shatters the world of every character. You can really feel the traits that will eventually emerge in Superman, as Clark is just as much of a rock to the people around him as Seg is to his friends, and it's just so hard not to see how them entering the lives of these people changes them for the better. And just like Superman, Seg is just as reliant on the people he's surrounded by as they are on him. They ground him, make his world make sense. Lyda, his grandfather, Adam, Kem, Nyssa, each of them has this very specific moment where they meet Seg again for the first time after he returns from the Phantom Zone, and each time it feels like two broken pieces finally merging back together. Seg suffers so much throughout the course of the show, and it's his friends, their hope, that always builds him back up to be bigger and better. As the main character, Seg, of course, clashes with the show's main villains time and time again, and every time it feels like a clash of the giants, despite Seg always being weaker, always being on the back foot, because he just has this never back down energy and mindset. Like, the final battle is him just throwing hands with General Zod, with this elite confidence, despite the fact that Zod's probably the most skilled fighter on Krypton. Seg is the man, and I think the thing that makes it feel all the more better is that Seg-Al's actor, Cameron Cuff, is a legit huge nerd and big comic fan, and you can just feel that passion every moment he's on screen. But if I had to choose my absolute favorite character and actor, it would have to be the show's second main character, Adam Strange, played by Sean Sipos. Adam Strange, as a character from the comics, has always been, for lack of a better word, strange to me. He never really jumped out despite being a classic character, and even in great comics like Strange Adventures, a really amazing, albeit non-DC main canon comic that you should 100% check out by the way, even though he was very well written, he still didn't stick with me. Until Krypton. Adam Strange is an absolute fucking loser. A complete bum. A goddamn failure. Every time he appears on screen, he loses copious amounts of aura, and I love him for that. I love him to pieces because Adam's flaws color everything he does, and it makes every action he takes so intriguing and powerful because Adam knows he's a loser. He traveled back in time because he thought saving Superman would prove himself as a real hero. He had this fantasy in his head that by doing this, he could go from a D-list nobody to an A-list somebody, and he fails over and over and over again. And each of those failures makes it so that when Adam does do heroic stuff, and he keeps doing heroic stuff, and you just start to see him truly care for Krypton and the people he meets there, it's so cathartic. Because in reality, Adam isn't a loser. He modified the Zeta Beam device himself for time travel. He's a fantastic leader. He sacrifices his own well-being for others time and time again. And when you witness and you realize all of this, it makes it so that every time he flounders, you keep just hoping for the best more and more. And every time he succeeds, you can't help but just feel this incredible joy. Like, Adam Strange in this show is legit my son. Like, I watched this boy grow up, and every episode, I felt more and more proud. My favorite scene of his, and one of my favorite in the entire show, has to be when he returns to Rand from Krypton in Season 1, and talks to Sardath and Alana. It's just so heartbreaking. You have to watch it.
You're not even gonna give me a chance? Come on, man. You gotta at least let me try. This is Superman that we're talking about here. There's no one like him in the universe.
Have you ever committed to anything in your life? I know you, Adam. As soon as things get hard, you'll be out of there in a flash.
Please, Sardath. You're right about who I was. Now give me a chance to be who I should be.
Alana?
Can he do it? I don't think so. But I've never seen him care about anything so much before. Certainly not me. I say we let him try.
Yes, thank you. I promise I won't let you down.
It's way too late for that, Adam.
Alana.
When Alana enters the conversation, you can just feel this man's heart shatter and reform like 10 times in 1 second. The way she talks about him, and then to him, right before he's teleported away, that's the good shit right there. We only ever get pieces of Adam's backstory prior to the show, but the complicated history that we can infer from this conversation is incredible. The final character I want to talk in depth about is Zod. While we're initially presented with the goal of halting Brainiac, Drew Zod, played by Colin Salmon, is the real villain of the show's 2 seasons, and he's a damn good one. While Adam Strange didn't stick out to me before Krypton, I at least cared about him somewhat. Zod, on the other hand, has just always bored me, no matter the Superman media, and he's in all of them. He's just always felt so generic, and him having Superman's same power set did not help him stick out. But Krypton made me do a complete 180 on the character. While I might like Adam and Seg more as people, Zod is undoubtedly the best written character in the show. Zod is a fascist and an absolute Kryptonian nationalist. He believes in his planet above all and sees himself as the only one with the ability and the vision and the will to bring Kryptonian society into the future. The Zod family has always had incredibly harsh upbringings of their children. We see that with how Jaina is raised by her father and how she raises Lyta. And while the Lyta we see grow and develop in the show probably wouldn't have raised Zod that way, we know that in the original timeline, before all the time travel shenanigans, the bottling of Kandor absolutely broke her. Especially since it's revealed that Seg is Zod's biological father, and he died during the bottling of the original timeline. Knowing all of this, it's not hard to see already that Zod wouldn't have had the best childhood, but then we have to add on the fact that Kryptonopolis, the city Lyta fled to after the bottling of Kandor, and the city Zod grew up in, faced the same kind of political corruption as Kandor, so much so that Zod eventually led a coup in his adulthood. Then we have to add on the fact that Jor-El, his best friend, betrayed him and had him banished to the Phantom Zone for attempting his coup, and then, while trapped in the Phantom Zone, he had to witness his planet destroyed, with no survivors because of the arrogance of the same corrupt politicians he had tried to overthrow. All of this makes Zod wanting to go back in time and stop all this from ever happening so understandable. But of course, Zod is still the villain, and the show manages to keep all of this backstory while still clearly showing Zod as absolutely in the wrong. Zod is a brutal dictator who tortures, brainwashes, and kills all who oppose his rule because he believes he knows best, and the only way to save Krypton is to reshape it in his image. He's so strong in this belief that he's willing to kill Lyta, his own mother, for going against him, before deciding to subject her to the Black Mercy parasite instead, viewing it as a kinder fate. Because on some level, yes, he still cares about her, the rest of his family, and Kryptonian society, but he's so consumed by his own anger and arrogance that no amount of shitty childhood or the fact that he's still capable of empathy changes the fact that the man is literally Space Hitler and needs to pay severely for his actions. The other villains, while not as complex as Zod, are also really fucking good. They were actually a focal point in the marketing of Season 2, and for good reason. This is without a doubt my favorite Brainiac adaptation. The character designers and costume and makeup department went so unbelievably hard, making him look like he came right off the page, with some extra design elements like his wrinkly green skin and the black voids he has for eyes, and the unevenly sized and haphazardly placed diodes on his head. And the acting by Blake Ritson was fantastic and helped to sell the character tremendously. How he talks, his cadence, and how his voice sounds. It's so incredibly done and makes him sound so distant and calculating and alien. He also kind of sounds like Elon Musk to me, which is fitting because I don't think any of us can be sure if Elon Musk is actually human.
That was something. I am become meme. Yeah, pretty much.
Oh my god, bro.
Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man? Get your ass.
Lobo is, similarly to Brainiac, ripped right off the page in both design and mannerisms, with Emmett J. Scanlon doing a terrific job, and the Irish accent genuinely complements the characters so well. Our final villain is Doomsday, and he's also really great. The design isn't perfect, the show still has a limited budget after all, but he is still just as much of a terrifying monster and unstoppable force as ever. He also has a depressing ass backstory too, which I never would have expected, but absolutely adored. The other heroic characters aside from Seg and Adam are pretty well done too, with the actors all putting in some great performances. Georgina Campbell as Lyta Zod is wonderful. Wallace Day's Nessa Vex and Adolf Bomo's Jaina Zod have these incredible themes of nature versus nurture and motherhood. Rasmus Hardiker's Kem became such an utter badass near the end. Ian McKellenny's Val-El was the perfect kind father figure. Elliot Cohen made Darren Vex's scheming all the more enjoyable, and Hannah Waddingham did a fantastic job, as she always does in the role of Jax I also want to note that both Anok Bomo and Aaron Peer, who plays Devem, are in other DC projects. Anne plays Philippus in the DCEU Wonder Woman movie, and Aaron is going to play Green Lantern John Stewart in the new DCU. I just always love when actors play different roles in multiple projects, so I wanted to mention that. But of course, now that we've talked about why the show was so good, we have to ask why then was it cancelled, despite plans for it to continue. Unfortunately, Krypton, despite the positive reviews it got while airing, simply didn't meet its audience, and got cancelled due to low viewership, with Season 2 having much lower viewership compared to Season 1, despite Season 2 definitely being better IMO. There's several reasons for the show's lack of viewership. First of all, it was a Superman prequel instead of a straight-up Superman show, and it's set even farther back in the past than something like Smallville, with Clark not even being in the show. At the end of the day, it being connected to Superman just wasn't the same as him actually being in it. There's also the fact that the show was on SYFY, an already low viewership channel. You can make the greatest show of all time, and if it's only available on like fucking Quibi, then of course people aren't going to give it a chance. Krypton wasn't on Quibi, that was just an example, but it was on the DC Universe app, which tried to do streaming before realizing that nobody was going to buy a streaming service just for DC shows. So sadly, Krypton failed because it was a niche show that you could only watch on niche channels and services, and so it didn't bring in enough money for DC or SYFY or anyone else to justify its continuation. And that sucks. It really does, because this show genuinely had such great stuff going on for it, and tons of love and care was put into every aspect of the show. There are several scenes in Season 2 with phenomenal directing that you can just tell had some blood, sweat, and tears put into them, and the fact that the story of the show will never be fully realized is a shame, because the information we have on what could have gone down in Season 3 and the planned Lobo spinoff sounds awesome. The show kind of ended on a cliffhanger, and it was super unsatisfying, with so many loose threads, and it was because they were already in the process of writing these next projects, thinking they were going to be able to tell the story they wanted to tell before the network cut them off. All this next info, by the way, about the planned Season 3 comes directly from an interview with the showrunner Cameron Welsh. We would have gotten introduced to the Thanagarians and the Omega Men and the Eradicator and Red Kryptonite, and I'll just put all the information on the screen for you to read, but needless to say, all of it just sounded really fucking cool and fun, and it sucks that it's never going to happen now without either some kind of miracle or me getting a Zeta Beam device and traveling back in time to tell DC to put the show on HBO or Netflix instead of goddamn SYFY. It sucks to end on a sour note, so I'm going to end this video with a positive, that while Krypton was cancelled, and that does suck, what we got was still really enjoyable, and if this video interested you, I recommend giving the show a watch. It's not cinema or anything, but I think it's still an enjoyable series, and if you are one of those people who watch Krypton, how are you holding up after the show's end, and knowing it got cancelled? Did the information about the planned Season 3 excite you? Or do you think the show, if it got renewed for a third season, should have gone in a different direction? I'd love to know your thoughts. For now though, this has been me, Z, and I'll see you next time, ya fraggin' bastiches.